Under Siege was released in 1992 when Steven Seagal was on the top of the world after starring in 4 wildly successful movies in a row, finally cementing his status of a Hollywood megastar. 3 years later, after the second part, Under Siege in Dark Territories was released, there was nothing left from this status though, and Steven's career rapidly rolled to the rock bottom. My name is Alex Lance, and in this video we will examine the downfall of Under Siege franchise. It all started when Warner Brothers purchased the script for a Die Hard on a Battleship movie called Dreadnought. The writer J.F. Lawton kindly agreed to sell it for a cool $1 million, which you might think, just like me, is well above a reasonable price. Well, you can transfer the Die Hard to another location and make a meal of it? Especially when it is a spec, taking into account that it was heavily revised after checking by studio. But the thing is that back that time J.F. Lawton had a very good reason to keep the price high. Just a year prior he had written a now classic Pretty Woman, and for that had been named a talented creator. His script called for a much larger budget than Warner Brothers were willing to spend, with tons of exploded helicopters, explosions in general, nuclear bombs, a whole bunch of stuff. What it didn't have was Steven Seagal. Originally the main character was an older Vietnam War veteran accompanied by a brave soldier. The plan was for them to sink the whole ship and escape covered in wounds from all kinds of injuries. But when it came time to make the movie, they decided to change the main character to an Aikido master, turn the serious wounds to a minor scratch that would appear and disappear from shot to shot, and replace the brave soldier with a stripper. Originally she was supposed to be among bad guys and take part in killing the whole crew along with other terrorists. And Steven Seagal initially didn't like the idea to team up with a bimbo jumping out of a cake. It wouldn't be realistic, you know. I don't need any help from anybody, you know. But over the years he changed his mind and began to claim that it was his genius idea to make the young lady his sidekick to add some fun. What a twist! Others have suggested that the only contribution from Steven Seagal was to have Erika Eleniak to jump out of that mentioned cake topless. Of course topless.
Don't stop, go on.
Her role could have gone to Pamela Anderson, by the way, who later claimed that she lost the part only because she refused to engage in some fun activities Steven Seagal had in mind for her to offer. Pamela also hinted that Erika Eleniak, who was also in Baywatch by the way, together with Miss Anderson in 1989, apparently didn't refuse the offer in her turn. But we will never know, right? Those are just speculations. Besides, Erika categorically denies these insinuations and even went so far to claim that Steven was a real gentleman on set. Gary Busey spoke about the Roadrunner as of a very insecure person who wanted so much to include a sex scene with Erika in Under Siege for... I don't know what it would be there for. Having some intimacy on a captured battleship. The whole this thing with all of those spicy scenes in 90s action movies, I don't know what they all were there for. Maybe to give me those awkward moments while watching movies on VHS with parents. Andrew Davis, the mastermind behind Under Siege, decided to limit the steamy scenes to a single topless moment. Davis had worked with Seagal before on the film Above the Law in 1988, where Seagal first demonstrated his impressive hand-waving skills. He claimed that back those days the actor was much easier to work with and much nicer person. Well, this time, again, according to what the guy says, Davis agreed to direct the movie only because he enjoyed working with Tommy Lee Jones.
I like your attitude. Excellent.
And Steven was kind of an unwanted side effect of this experience. Rising Star was often full of brilliant ideas which he was bound to include in the movie. He so badly wanted to keep his trademark ponytail, despite the rule against haircuts longer than 4 inches or 10 centimeters on a battleship, that had came up with a variety of creative ways to justify its presence. For example, he suggested that the cook was so tough that he should be allowed to have a ponytail as a personal exception from Admiral or President. I don't know. After all, Jean-Claude Van Damme is allowed to do his splits in every movie, so why shouldn't Seagal be allowed to keep his thing? But the filmmakers were not swayed, and Seagal was forced to make the great sacrifice for the Emperor. And in the end, it seems that the sacrifice was worth it. Under Siege is one of only 3 movies with Steven Seagal that received a positive response from critics. The other 2 are Executive Decision, in which Seagal has a brief appearance before dying shortly after, and Machete, in which he plays a small role of a big villain. Under Siege was even nominated for Oscar for the best sound editing. Didn't win though, but still. Also, the movie's great success at the box office was the reason to postpone the third actual Die Hard. It was supposed to be a Die Hard on a ship. A cruise ship, not military, but you know. When Under Siege was released in 1992, it stormed the box office, took the top spot and held on to it for 4 consecutive weeks. On the 5th week, it was dethroned by another Die Hard movie, this time on a plane and starring Wesley Snipes. With a budget of $35 million, which would be about $75 million today, Under Siege raked in $156 million, which would be about $336 million in modern money. It became the highest grossing movie in Seagal's career, which he wouldn't have managed to outdo ever after. It's safe to say that Under Siege made a killing on VHS sales, with rental tapes being completely worn out from endless rewinding to Erika Eleniak's jumping out of a cake moment. Ryback's role helped to cement Seagal's reputation as a major Hollywood player. He even had opportunity to cringe miserably on Saturday Night Live, something that not everyone can boast about. Can you? I don't think so. I can't. Seeing impressive results the first part demonstrated in theaters, Warner Brothers immediately demanded the continuation of a banquet. Studio bosses were eagerly rubbing their hands in anticipation for a sequel, but at that moment Steven Seagal's ego, that was already quite large, after his success has reached planetary scale. He announced that would not go any further unless Warners allowed him to feed the growing ego with a blockbuster about his spiritual superiority over all other humans. As a result, the studio had to allow Seagal to spend $50 million on a vanity project on the ground, which, as I have discussed in one of my previous videos about rise and fall of Steven Seagal's the whole movie career, link in the description, was a flop that had a noticeable impact on Seagal's superstar status. Therefore, Seagal should have been willing to do whatever it took to save his career with the sequel of his most successful movie, Under Siege. But he stubbornly refused to listen to reason and was unwilling to fix up even his growing stomach. Instead, he showed up on set with a bunch of new cool outfits and a corset to hide his growing belly under these outfits.
I wanna say something, but you were all that I see. You got dynamite, that smile's gonna be the end of me. I bet you taste like chocolate. Can I have it for free? I'm an explosion, that smile's gonna be the end of me.
Just like the first part, Under Siege 2 was a copycat of Die Hard, this time on a train. The original script had nothing to do with the Under Siege franchise or Seagal's character Casey Ryback. It was titled In Dark Territory and had a quite trending plot. The same year with Under Siege 2 was released GoldenEye, about James Bond fighting a genius hacker who had also hijacked an orbital space weapon. The studio hired a script doctor to make some changes to the script, fit there an Aikido master and turn it into Under Siege 2. This time Steven wanted to have a much more creative input and was aiming to a director's chair. But after the disaster of On Deadly Ground, studio paid him off with the producer's credit and gave the director's duty to an actual director, Geoff Murphy. Main villain's role was offered to Gary Oldman, Lawrence Fishburne, Julian Sands, and Jeff Goldblum. All of them refused to work with a wonderful, newly minted producer, as rumors about Steven's unbearable weight of massive talent were already circulating across Hollywood. Who was ready to play a villain in the movie though was Gary Busey, one of 2 villains from the previous part. Despite the fact that his character had definitely died in an explosion in the first movie, the filmmakers still wanted to bring him back to life. Busey signed a pay-or-play contract which guaranteed him $750,000 whether he worked on the movie or not. When Seagal, as a producer, found out about this deal, he paid Busey money out of his own pocket just to keep him off the set, either because the idea of a character miraculously coming back to life was too ridiculous, or because Busey had openly pressed dislike on Seagal.
Sir, why do you tolerate that clown?
By the way, about likes. I would really appreciate if you tap one under this video. As for the ridiculousness of the script, I doubt that it was the reason Seagal paid Busey off. Steven had much funnier ideas than that. The writer, Matt Reeves, constantly complained about the title actor trying to disrupt the creative process, with ideas one greater than another.
It's sort of a daily struggle, you know, to trying to ensure the quality of what you're doing.
For example, Steven wanted to turn Everett McGill's character into a alleged werewolf because he liked his performance 10 years prior to that in a Stephen King's adaptation Silver Bullet, with Gary Busey in a title role, by the way. This suggestion led to endless jokes about Seagal behind his back on set. Under Siege 2, Dark Territory was released without being shown to test audience or critics, who tended to be dismissive to the action movies genre in general and Seagal in particular. The first Under Siege was also released without being shown to test audience or critics for the very same reason. It didn't stop critics from giving Under Siege 2 fake reviews and fake low ratings, which I consider to be a dirty move.
You know, the critics are in general very, very timid, you know, cowardly people.
That maybe they were the bully that beat them up in school?
Exactly, that's the, you know.
Dark Territory was released on 2,100 screens in July 1995 and took the second place on its opening weekend with $12 million behind Apollo 13. The following weekend it dropped to 4th place, and by the 4th weekend it had left the top 10 grossing movies. Eventually the sequel grossed $100 million with a budget of 60, which can be considered a flop. Though not as catastrophic as on Deadly Ground, but it became clear that Seagal's glory days were coming to an end. He promised studio bosses that he would get in shape and lose his belly, so Warner Brothers gave green light to Under Siege 3 for him, which is a pretty big credit for a Hollywood actor with a Seagal's track record. Warner's again obtained a spec that had nothing to do with the Under Siege movies, this time about a giant defense plant taken over by terrorists, and wanted to fit Seagal into it. However, despite promises he gave to studios, Seagal was no longer able to fit on screen.
And, you know, they think that, somebody has to gain weight, and be fat for a movie. Well,
instead of getting in shape, Sensei got in numerous troubles. Due to cocky personality, massive ego, mental issues that often accompany those traits.
And that's his.
So Warner Brothers decided to give up on him and cancelled the third installment of Under Siege along with a dozen of other upcoming projects. In 2014, Seagal again started talking about the third movie in franchise, as soon as he will deal with some problems. Apparently he had not dealt with them, his belly remains unfixed, ego has reached the size of a black hole, and, well, you probably know the Space Ice channel, where you can get a sense of quality of Seagal's recent movies. There is also another nice channel about them, Sensei Seagal. So you can probably imagine the kind of Under Siege 3 we could have expected from our dear friend. In November 2021 there were also rumors about Under Siege reboot on HBO Max, certainly without Steven Seagal. Just as if Hollywood has completely ran out of original ideas and must resort to taking an original script and turning it to yet another sequel. When will this never-ending flood of sequels and reboots finally end, and people will recognize an abundance of creative ideas waiting to be explored? As I told before, recently I have covered the whole theatrical movie career of Steven Seagal from its rise to fall. If you have already checked it out and liked, you will definitely like such a video about Van Damme, so check it out. It's also on the channel. Till the next time, cheers.